Okay, so welcome everybody. We'll call the meeting to order. Just a little after 3 here. Um, shall we, let's see, do we have new people we'd like to introduce?
We have a representative from the city here. He's not sworn in yet, so he can't vote, but he's still attending today, so.
And I will be soon.
He will be soon, yes.
Hi, I'm Pierre. Nice to meet everyone. Representative for the city, and I grew up here. Yeah, cool. Anything else? Okay.
Anybody else? All right, the review of the agenda is pretty brief today. So, we didn't get it out any too early, so I had asked for, we really ought to think about our plans for the year, which came off as review of committee structure. That's part of it, certainly, and an important part of it. But with the short notice, I'm not sure how much people have thought about where they might like to see this organization go in the next 12 months. But if we put it off to the next meeting, we'd be already a quarter of the way through the year before we even thought about it. Any objection to doing that as part of our agenda for today? Seems amenable. Okay. The minutes. They were a lot briefer than some we have seen in the past.
They were done well.
Mhm.
And I'll move to adopt them if nobody else wants to make that motion.
Sure. And the second? Ronnie? Any discussion? If not, should be by roll call, shouldn't it?
Yes.
Would you like to conduct it?
Okay, Dan Klein,
Yes.
Joanne James. Rod Howe,
Aye.
Joel Gagnon,
Yes.
Mark Whitmer,
Aye.
Ronnie Hardaway,
Yes.
Gordon Hart,
Yes.
Don Scheffler,
Aye.
Linda Woodard,
Abstained.
Robert Lynch,
Aye.
and Jason Leeper.
Yes.
Okay. I think that passed handily.
Yes.
Lisa, would you like to tell us what's going on at the county?
Sure. Thank you, Joel. I believe you've all been updated, but I'll state it for TCOG's minutes that the county received a notification last week that we had received the local government efficiency grant from the state to support the rapid response program, about $630,000, $629,000. It was more than we had originally thought we were eligible for through that grant, and it's wonderful news. It's 90% of the first year costs of the grant. We thought we were only eligible through that grant for 10% of the cost. So this is welcome news, and that we received it so early in the year is also very helpful to us. An update on how that's going. The Department of Emergency Response had the positions posted, I believe, in December. They have many applicants for not for 9 positions. We have 3 full-time positions, 3 part-time, and 3 per diem. So in order to keep the positions staffed and so forth. And they're going through the procurement processes for supplies, et cetera, prepping for the target is for an April 1st start date. And I think for all intents and purposes, they are on track right now for that April 1st start date. So given that, and given where the conversations left off, I believe in January, December, the last meeting of TCOG, I would love to follow up with the discussion with municipal leaders about cost sharing models for 2025. We know 2024 is taken care of, but would like to continue that conversation. And I will likely be sending out some dates and times for a meeting in February to start having that conversation. And then finally, more on shared services. I noted through NISAC in the governor's budget is calling for, I believe, the elimination of the shared services program in 2025. However, more funding has been added to the local government efficiency program, the one that we received the grant for. So we'll stay tuned on that as it will still have to go through the Senate and Assembly's process, and we'll see where things stand there. I think those are all the updates I have.
Thank you. That potential abolition of the shared services program is interesting. This group originated out of shared services programming. Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. That's kind of interesting, given that that we got this great award for this government efficiency grant. And I wonder if that's sort of, that was sort of anticipating this movement. If the shared services is sort of being subsumed by the government efficiency grant, I don't know. That's just a question.
Yeah, I'm unable to speculate on it either, but it does cross my mind.
It does raise the possibility that, well, it was getting harder and harder to find services to share. We could have meaningful efficiencies. So and we had to sort of bend and crumple the ideas in order to get them to fit into the mold that was needed in order to frame it as a shared service. So the fact that the money came through a different route, I mean, it's a lot easier to argue efficiency without having to have it be a shared efficiency. So, but that does also mean that if it goes that way, that this group, which is focused on what we can collaboratively achieve, becomes more important, I guess, in terms of filling what's left of the void, so to speak.
Yes.
Any other comments for Lisa?
We have a hand here in chambers.
Which I can't see from here, but yeah.
Joel, this is Bob Lynch. I had a question for Lisa. And that is that I know our Enfield Town Board in December passed a resolution, which you may or may not have received, indicating that we wanted to build on what Roden Hart said at a prior meeting regarding the 2025 cost sharing agreement. And it was our desire, and I wonder if it's TCOG's desire, and perhaps it will work with the county administration schedule, if we have that cost sharing discussion for 2025 collaboratively, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And perhaps a number of town representatives could be sitting around this table or in your office somewhere and discuss how this can be worked out. And maybe it could take one meeting rather than a dozen meetings to reach some kind of collaborative consensus. Just an idea.
It sounded kind of like Lisa was suggesting that sort of thing, or was I mishearing?
Yeah, I think that's what I was hoping could happen in February. That we could convene a meeting and discuss that. And my hope too would be that it wouldn't take several meetings, but that we could get input on a cost sharing model that might make sense and a way of moving forward for 2025.
Thank you.
Were you suggesting, Bob, that that could be an extraordinary meeting of TCOG, or?
I don't know. That's up to the TCOG membership, or whether perhaps the administration would rather do it separately. That's kind of the administration's call, I presume.
Would it be easier?
If the representative, if we just want to bring the elected officials of the various municipalities together, if that's most efficiently done through TCOG, that would be a fine way of proceeding. I saw Rod had his hand up.
Yes.
Well, just some of us may, like, I'm not going to be the one to sit in on the meeting. The deputy supervisor for the town will be, so that might be the case for other municipalities. So I think it's simpler to have a separate meeting. Lisa will send out an email. We'll identify or we'll just share that email with those that we plan to represent our municipality. She'll choose a date. My guess is we'll have plenty of other things to talk about at our next TCOG meeting. And maybe there'd even be an update from the subgroup by the next time TCOG meets.
Sounds good. Everybody agreeable? Okay. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
FEMA report on the preliminary flood insurance rate maps, which we are hot off the press, so to speak. Now we just got them.
Yeah, so I can introduce this. I'm here in the chambers. My name is Abigail Connor. I'm the environmental planner for the Tompkins County Department of Planning and Sustainability. And we've been working on coordination and outreach with FEMA. As you know, we saw the earlier parts of the process. We are now at this appeal part of the process. And, we got that email. I think most folks should have seen that. That came from FEMA, I believe, in December about the dates coming. And, we kind of wanted to get ahead of this. So I asked our colleagues at FEMA, Thomas Song, who's here representing FEMA, to come and speak with you all just to describe what that process looks like to ensure you all feel prepared as we head into that appeal period, which is the next step of those maps being released. And I do have a little update after that portion is done, just on a little work that our department is doing regarding education and outreach. So I will pass it over to Thomas, and I will note that Brianna from the New York State DC Flood Hub is here as well.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Look, I really appreciate the opportunity to address the council, or I don't know, maybe I should hold off my appreciation depending on how hard, what kind of questions you folks ask me. But I do want to make this more of a conversation because there's important things going on in the county. And what FEMA, the Region 2 office, is doing now is we were in the process of updating your flood maps. We are now at that kind of last mile or that last stretch. This is a project that started about 10 years ago. In 2014, we actually had what we call discovery meetings. I don't know what your experience is with flood maps or what your perceptions are, but the important part of our process is that it is not done in a black box or behind a curtain. We want and we need the community's involvement. And so 10 years ago, we had a discovery meeting, gather all the folks around. We ask them, hey, what data do you have? What are your priorities? What are your issues? And we wanted to get as much of the local information or that local knowledge many of you have to kind of guide where our project goes. And so then a few years later, we initiated the data collection. And then we started having meetings with you folks. We have a number of touch points with the communities because we understand how important this process is. We understand that there's a lot for the communities to get up to speed with. And at the end of the day, these flood maps are adopted in local ordinances. So while you can say that these are FEMA flood maps, they are your community's maps, right? They will affect the way your community will develop in these areas that are flood prone or that have high flood hazard risk. So they affect your folks, but they can also be used to protect them, to make sure that your communities are building stronger and smarter. And so this is very important information. But in this process, right, at every milestone, we were giving you folks updates. We were telling you that you are part of this process. And now it's really kind of, this is more demonstrative of what we're meaning, of what we were talking about. Abigail mentioned the appeal period. So the communities have the right to appeal or to provide more comments on our flood maps. And these are very specific terms. You should have gotten that notice that Abigail talked about. Starting January 31st, at the end of this month, will start your 90-day appeal and comment period. And I'm going to break it down to two things here with the appeals and the comments. And let me start first with the comments. Let me go backwards because it's a little easier to describe. Comments have to do with anything that's not related to the flood zones. Right? So maybe we got a street name wrong. Maybe we have an old name for a lake. Maybe the administrative borders of a jurisdiction has changed. Maybe the one got annexed, one got dissolved, etc. If we have any of that stuff wrong, we want you folks to provide that and provide that information and update us. And we've been kind of asking that since the get-go. So that's the easy part. The harder part is the appeal period, the appeals. And what constitutes an appeal is not something where we have a flood zone and the community doesn't agree with it or doesn't like where it is. It has to be shown that we made some type of error, that that the methodology we used was not, as we sent the letter earlier saying what kind of engineering methodology we would be using to map this area. And it is really on the community. It's for them to prove this. Unfortunately, that usually requires them hiring an engineer. The cost is borne on the community. FEMA does not reimburse whether or not the appeal wins or loses. We do not provide funding for a community to do this, to take this action. And so the community would have to show that based on the engineering data that we share with everyone, again, if there is a mistake, if there was a way that we are misrepresenting, some of these outputs in the community, et cetera. Really, the bottom line is there has to be technical proof or evidence that the flood zones that are shown currently in the maps are wrong. And that is something that within these 90 days, we want the communities to hopefully we were telling them and giving you enough notice about this when we would get to this point. But that 90-day window is the opportunity for the communities to submit this information and make an official appeal. Okay. I want to stress something here. Maps change all the time, whether it's on a property basis or it's on a larger geographic area. Maps could always be changed. There are different processes, and there may be a cost to it that would be borne on whoever is requesting the change. One of the difference with the appeal period is that all the costs to review, to change the maps, et cetera, would be on FEMA. Again, the community would still have to bear the cost to get that, to show the engine, to hire the engineering professionals to show that we made the mistakes or there were errors in our outputs. It's a lot of information now. Let me stop. Questions? Anybody?
I was going to add a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Are these appeals necessarily municipal? In other words, could a property owner initiate an appeal themselves?
Yeah. So, and that is an excellent question because that is asked a lot. So, the changes On a larger scale would be a community. If it was maybe an organization, the community would still have to be involved. They would have to kind of endorse this appeal on behalf of another entity.
Mhm.
When it comes to individuals, they're usually concerned about their property, right? It's usually a very small geographic area in question. There is a whole separate process to that, and that is called the letter of map amendment. Okay, and I can share with the group, and I can share with Abigail some follow-up, some documents that can provide more information that you can share with your residents. This process to get an individual property, in quotes, mapped out, is that we would have to show, or I'm sorry, the property owner would have to show that the ground level would be higher than the flood level.
Mhm.
Right? So just, you don't have to be an engineer to understand, if the ground is higher than the flood level, well, that water would never touch the building. And if that is the case, they can get a letter that says, it's a legal letter that basically says they are no longer in a special flood hazard area. We don't change the maps because to make a change on such a scale, these maps, I think it's 1 inch equals 1,000 feet or something to that effect. To make us a change on a small parcel, it wouldn't make sense. It would be cost prohibitive, and it's almost barely indiscernible. So instead, they get this letter. They can give it to their lenders. They can give it to, if they're selling their property, they can give it to their prospective buyers. And it does, on FEMA letterhead, does state that the home is no longer in a special flood hazard area. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. We can go into some of the details, but I think I have a 1-page handout, 2-page handout that I'll share with you. It's got pictures to kind of describe the whole thing. I think it'll help any of your residents who are interested to understand the process. That, by the way, is free for the homeowner. There usually is a cost involved because they have to hire a surveyor to get that ground elevation.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have any questions? So, I'm sorry, was someone going to ask a question?
I have a clarifying question for
Yes,
you,
please.
Thomas. It's Abigail. So can you clarify that letter of map amendment process happens after the maps are adopted and is not part of this appeal process?
Correct. So, and thank you for that. So it wouldn't be part of this appeal period. This letter of map amendment, we would wait until the maps are final, and then that property owner can then submit or apply for that letter of map amendment. They can do it a day after the maps are final. They can do it a month. They can do it a year. They can do it 5 years. All they have to do is supply that survey data to, again, show that the ground level would be higher than the water.
Does the map indicate what that level is? So does you know what you're demonstrating you're higher than?
Yes, sir. So some parts of the map will actually show flood levels. The base flood elevation is what we refer to it, or the 1% annual chance flood, and that flood level. Some will have lines with numbers, and then you'll have to look at a table. There are some areas that don't have flood levels, and that becomes a little bit trickier. So one of the things I will also share with you is we have a call center so that your homeowners, look, no one expects anyone to understand this the first time around. And we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of supporting documents to help people navigate this. And we also have a call center that they can call. And those folks will kind of walk them through what is needed and possibly advise what their situation is on whether or not they have a chance or not, and then give them more instructions. Brianna, did I miss anything? Is there anything that New York State would like to add?
Nothing specific for me, just that, DEC is also here to help provide assistance to the communities as you go through this process. So if people have questions, they're always welcome to reach out to our office as well.
Yeah, thank you. And while we're on the topic of the changing the maps, if any of the communities make a change in their within their jurisdictional boundaries that would affect the flood zone, the community is supposed to update both DEC and FEMA. And again, we would make the the projects of that scale usually have that engineering data because it's part of the requirements, part of the permitting requirements to take such actions in an area in a flood area. And so again, those changes can take place, and it'll take place after the maps are final. So, I don't want everybody to think that once this appeal period is over, that's it. You don't have you can't change the maps anymore. They can be changed at any time. Anyone else? Any other questions or anything FEMA related?
Was there more from you? I think you say paused for question implied that there was more to follow the pause.
I was actually going to talk about the changing the maps afterwards, but you asked a question, so we did cover that topic. And again, I'll follow up with some documents that can be shared with your residents. You can take a look at them. You can provide the links on your websites or have copies in your offices.
Any questions for Thomas or Brianna? I think it looks like we're pretty comfortable with the process. We've been very communicative all along here.
Yeah, and look, so we have given out our contact information and the numerous slide decks that we've done in our webinars or our in-person meetings. We give them to you so you can use them. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact us at any time. You can go through Abigail, you can go through DEC, you can contact us directly. We're here to support you all.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Thomas. I will say Thomas is incredibly responsive, and we're very appreciative to have him with us at Region 2, and Brianna from the DEC is as well. The only other thing I want to mention is a lot of this information, as we've been getting it from the DEC and from FEMA, is on a webpage we have on the Tompkins County domain. So it's Tompkins, it's our regular address, /flood-info. And so that information is there, a lot of these things. And once we get that information from Thomas, we'll add that up there as well. And I'll send it along. We'll get that out to you guys, those sheets. The other thing I just wanted to mention in alignment with that is this process is pretty complicated and is hard the first go around. And it has been a little while since Tompkins County has had to go through this process. So something our office is working on now is to update a little bit of that information on our flood info page there, thinking about the goal is to make a series of 2.5-minute videos that really walk folks through the process of some of these things that they may want to educate themselves on before they go down that road. So, for example, there may be more folks who will be in need of pulling a floodplain permit. So potentially interviewing a code enforcement officer and kind of talk about what that process looks like. Keep them short, 2.5 minutes tops. The process that Thomas mentioned, that letter of map amendment, interviewing a surveyor, talking about what it takes, what information you'll need to bring to go to a surveyor and get that letter of map amendment. An insurance agent, kind of talking about what the process looks like, what your options are for flood insurance. And I guess my question for this group, since I have your attention here at the moment, is if there are any subject matters or professionals that you think are a good idea for us to approach, or pieces of this information that you think are a big piece that you'd like us to think about as an education aspect for the public. No pressure to have that answer for me right now, but I'll leave some cards around and Jordan can send my information along if folks don't have something now, but just curious if there's any folks you'd like us to focus on, any topics as we think about that education aspect.
As far as topics go, the thing that keeps coming up is confusion regarding, whether and under what circumstances flood insurance is required if you happen to be in a floodplain designated area.
Sure. Okay. Did you want me to address that now?
Well, if you would, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you are in what we're concerned with is not the land, but the actual building itself. So
Right.
it doesn't matter if your backyard or your front yard is in a flood zone, there's a flood zone there. But if the building itself is shown in a flood zone, any part of it, and there is a mortgage with any type of federal backing, they are required to get flood insurance. Never really heard of a lender, regardless of federal backing or not, that waives that requirement. The only federal mandate is, again, if it has any type of federal insurance. That is the case. Now, if you own the property outright, do you have to get flood insurance? No. But if you are flooded, and if there is a FEMA disaster, a FEMA disaster declaration, right? And that's very rare in some parts of this state. Hasn't happened since Irene for many of you. From Sandy for many of you. If that's the case, they may not be eligible to get the full assistance that's offered for property owners that are outside of a flood zone. And if they do get any FEMA assistance, then they have what we call an obtain and maintain requirement. Then they would have to buy flood insurance, and they would have to maintain it.
Looking at it from the other side, are you eligible for insurance? Is it any easier to obtain if your house is if you are included in floodplain as opposed to outside of it?
So for the NFIP, we are the largest servicer of flood insurance. We will insure any property. There is flood insurance that are offered by private underwriters. They may be a little bit more selective in which properties that they would insure, but as far as the NFIP is concerned, we will insure every property.
So it doesn't have to be within a flood plain in order to be insured.
No, sir. And that's a good point that you bring up, because in the past 6 years, statistically, 40% of all of our claims have come outside of a flood zone. And I think what we've seen with these erratic rain events, right? The severe rain events concentrated over a number of hours, they're flooding areas that, again, may never have seen water before or would not be traditionally considered a high flood hazard area. And so the worst thing with homeowners, they think their homeowners insurance will cover them. You'll see that the insurance companies say that this is what's defined as a flood event, and now the homeowner is out of pocket. Mr. Murphy.
My question is that I know in Florida it's very expensive for you having your insurance. Is it based on the area? So we have somebody that's house that's close to a stream that would be in the flood. Are they paying the same nationally, or is it modified to the area or the situation, or how does that happen?
That's a good question. Just very simply put, there are some main factors on how we price a policy. Location, right? How close you are to a source of flooding. That is one of the factors. But if you're next to a river, but you're elevated on a bluff or, on a very steep hill, that might not be such a factor. The other thing, and the reason why I can't say, hey, there's a national level, a standard, or you can kind of make comparisons, because each home's risk is individualized to that particular house. One of the other factors that goes into pricing insurance policy is how much the cost for the replacement cost for that particular structure. So a home that has a replacement cost of $100,000 compared to a home that has a replacement cost of $500,000, they experience the same level of flooding. Well, the home with a higher value will most likely file a higher claim than the one with the lower value, right? Foot of water, everything being the same. Therefore, the home with the $100,000 replacement cost value should be paying a little bit less than the home with the higher value.
Is there competition? Is there
there-
competition among insurers for, so you could, if one were in need or perceived oneself to be in need, are there opportunities to sort of shop?
Yeah, I cannot stress that enough, sir. We don't take flood insurance lightly. We understand that it could be a burden on many households. And I'm not going to get into the virtues or the utility of getting that kind of coverage, but I will say that we understand cost is a factor for many homes. I cannot stress enough that people should shop around. It is unfortunate that they have to advocate for themselves, but we all know that every agent, not all agents are the same, just like, not all teachers are the same, or even government officials. We're not all the same. And so people, I recommend that people really shop around for the best agent, not the cheapest policy. Right? You need somebody who really knows their stuff and is out to take care of you, or will fulfill that responsibility to look out for your assets. And if you find that person, then I'd say, listen to their advice. But in theory, you can ask 10 different agents, and you should get the same quote from all 10. I'm a betting man, and I will bet against that. So people have to do their homework. They have to do a little legwork, and they should really just do business with somebody who they feel confident will take care of them.
That clarifies a lot.
Mr. Murphy, do you have another question?
Yeah, I have another question.
Yes, sir.
Basically, if they're going to do some searching to see what the different rates are, is there any place where they can look to see, is it a good company that, they rate insurance companies for health and life insurance? Some are rated better than others.
Yes, sir.
Is there a rating system for the flood? Because
there is none. We do have a website where we list out all the companies that sell flood insurance. So FEMA does not sell directly to the public. We rely on insurance companies to sell our policies. And this is just very common in the insurance industry. Look, just like anything else, right? You want to buy a car, you talk to your friends, your neighbors, referrals go a long way. And I think that is the one incentive for some agents to be on top of their game, right? To know their business, because hopefully their reputation is helping them get more business. And so we encourage agents to do their trainings, to read up on the latest on flood insurance or whatever insurance that they're selling, so that they can do right by their clients. And one of the things for all of us, right? I mean, I've owned my home for 12 years. I've had homeowners insurance, auto insurance. I can't remember the last time I talked to my agent, but he's making money off of me every single year. And I feel like I should make him earn it. So maybe I should call him every year and say, hey, what's my policy? What's going on? Is there something cheaper? Am I covered for this? The cost of raw materials has gone up. If my house burns down, am I covered? It's unfortunate. We do have to do our own legwork. But if you have agents who can answer your questions, who are being proactive to look out for your best interest, that's a person I think you can have trust with.
Thanks again.
In your own experience, right?
If there's no other questions, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, review of committee structure. And more broadly, whether that structure reflects objectives that we might have for the next year, whether some of these should be curtailed and maybe or others added. Comments, suggestions? We haven't thought about this for a while, but that's not a whole lot of virtue in running on autopilot. looking at the list, we were asked a couple of months ago by Don Barber to give us an update on agriculture. And it hasn't been a focus area of ours in recent times. But I think there are all kinds of opportunities for collaboration, perhaps in agriculture, and in fostering the viability of agriculture and expanding the local sourcing, growing, processing, and distribution that are pluses for the economy and also pluses in terms of the sustainability and reducing cost of the energy cost of food as a sector of the economy. And the trend, of course, in recent decades has been, increasingly global production. And I'm always astonished when I go into a store and see just in the produce section where all that produce is coming from. It's a rather different world than it was, a few decades ago. So I suggest that that's an area that we might want to explore, whether it warrants a committee or not. I'm open to people's thoughts about it. Nobody has any thoughts about it. If nothing else, we could invite Don in and just go from there.
Joe, that's what I was going to suggest. It feels like there are groups that are focused on agriculture in Tompkins County, so it might be worth just, and Don would know some, but maybe invite somebody from Extension as well when Don comes to just so we know what some of the broader issues might be across the county.
Yeah, Don is with what they call the Food Policy Council, right? Right. Cybersecurity was mentioned prominently in our some of our meetings in the course of the last year, and then there are related things too. But there certainly has been a concern in our town about the risks that we are under with the cost of ransom in the event that you get hacked. And how it's a heavy lift for the smaller municipalities in particular to suitably position themselves to be resistant to hacking and then to in order to minimize the cost of cybersecurity insurance, which not everybody's got. So that's I was at just enough of the county's recent forum to have some of the urgency sort of impressed me. And this is an area where if we approach it collectively, we might be able to learn a lot more and get a lot farther than each of us doing our own thing. Is that a hand up, Mark?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say about the previous topic that just a note that I saw this, that I think Anna Callis got this grant for this agri-solar initiative at Cornell about, I thought that was interesting, and I just wanted to mention it. I think that's something that's come up in our discussions here in our town conversations. And
yeah, and it relates to the whole energy committee focus too on, if we're looking at the push for electrification, and then how do we source the electricity in a way that you can get it from where it's generated to where it's needed. That is a problem that interfaces with the current location of the transmission lines and the tendency of developers to locate their solar arrays in proximity to, which in Tompkins County's case happens to be where a lot of our best farmland is also.
Yeah, I think it's a interesting concept where that these things can complement one another pretty well. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and mitigate some of the otherwise negative impact. Don.
I think it's a 100% conflict in my book. I'm looking at this in my town, and as long as everybody's hell bent on covering every square inch of Tompkins County with solar panels, I don't think you can expand food production. That's just my personal opinion.
Unless you want to grow shade-grown tobacco.
No, no,
Yeah.
I'm talking about edibles.
Yes, right.
And,
Yeah.
and even the solar companies can't find land to buy to mitigate the damage they're doing. So they can't even find garbage land. They're using the best of it, and they can't find garbage land so that they can foster bird production. That's what I'm seeing lately. So I think we all have to make up our minds whether we want solar or we want food, because it's coming to that very fast.
I guess, if I could just chime in, I mean, I don't know enough about it, but my understanding is that it would be a different way of doing things that where you integrate both agriculture and solar in an area. So.
Well, no one is lining up to buy mutton burgers. And that's the only thing that they're saying they can grow underneath a solar panel.
Cheap.
And
I'm just saying I'm interested in learning more is all.
Yeah.
well, I can loan you the books. I'm looking at 40 pounds of application right now. And out of that 16 inches of paperwork, there's nothing in it that improves agriculture. It's all the solar company is going to pay a mitigation fee to a government entity, and you still don't have anything to eat.
It's a nuanced problem because the reality is that we're producing a very relatively small fraction of the food that's consumed in Tompkins County, and if we were producing more of it here, we would need more of the land. But and when you're doing it, the costs of production are directly related to the quality of the land that you're using to grow it, use it. And you can grow food in less than ideal locations. And I know because I'm in Danby where we have a lot of less than ideal locations. But it's hard to compete against a place like Lansing or Dryden where the soils are better. But it is easy to compete if they're covered with solar panels and you can't use them. Michael.
I guess my question is, I wasn't aware, and maybe you could explain, you said the solar companies are looking for mitigation. Why do they have to mitigation? Because they're taking farmland or I'm not aware of that. I've never heard of it. I just thought they bought the land and they put their stuff up and that was it.
They're taking farmland, but they have to do studies. And for instance, in Groton, it's all redacted, but there are 13 endangered species that they're going to displace. So they have to buy, like say it was a bald eagle, they pay a fee to some other agency to take care of the bald eagles, and then they can chase them out. You and I would go to jail for it, but they don't.
So it's more that they're affecting the animals that are endangered or something like that. It's not that they're taking farmland away, that it's the other things that are on the land is what you're saying.
Well, it's all inclusive because the farmland is where the animals eat.
Oh, okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, the interface here between our push to electrify and agriculture is an area of I think it's worth thinking about, talking about, and maybe trying to have people contribute to the conversation with an eye to the future of sustainability of our economy, of which food is a the substantial part. Not as much as it should be, but and that's a function of cheap energy, in my opinion. But that's the reality of it. If it should suddenly change, we would discover how much our food is dependent upon that cheap energy framework to produce to give us what we're used to getting anymore. So, what about the committees? Otherwise, do you think that some of these we had key people who are no longer with us to spearhead. Should we go by committee by committee and say, yeah, that's a viable group, or
Sure.
well, starting out with broadband, friends at the top, where we are with that, with the counties now taking a lead role in and approach it from particular directions, saying that they're going to, and Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they're going to aim to get service to the locations that are not currently served. So that is that carved out one part of a bigger question, some of which was looked at in the broadband study that was done. There was a question not only the other parts of that are not just who isn't served, but how well are those who are served? The absence of competition, the cost of the service, the quality of the service are still components that are not being addressed by the county's initiative. And is that something we want to complement the county's efforts to investigate, pursue, or is it not of interest enough to be a focus for this group? Just asking. Dan.
I personally don't see a lot of opening for what you're describing, but if this group wants to do it, I have no problem with that. I was going to suggest that wait until a month or two when the county is able to finally announce what the plan is, and you'll have something to actually respond to or react to. Just a suggestion.
How do others feel? Should we perhaps put the committee and its function on the back burner? Or is there something salient that a committee should be pursuing in the meanwhile? Not hearing one way or the other. Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dan's suggestion is a good one. The county is, when they put something forward that we can react to, that would be good. Yeah, I think right now, at least we in Caroline are working, at a town level on an initiative, and I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course there's Dryden's initiative, which kind of leading the that whole alternative approach to dealing with the issue.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway,
So,
I endorse Dan's suggestion. So.
Yeah. But to me, that sounds like a recipe for inactivity for that committee for at least a couple of months, and then reacting to what the county brings forth. Okay.
I guess,
Um,
so Joel, certainly if you have a suggestion
mhm.
for what and why we might need to have a conversation sooner, I'm open to that too, but.
Well, I mean, this is an interest of mine. I think it's an interest of many of us. But if we're all willing to basically wait and see how well the county can address that most pressing component, which was getting service to those who are unserved, that could be a point of departure. And then in the meantime, Dryden's getting more experience. We'll see how it's going. Caroline's getting into it too. Um, all of those things influence how we feel about where we go from there. So, the county has identified, the most pressing need and is moving decisively to address it. So I think that's the good news. Okay. I was kind of involved in that group anyway, so if anybody else is willing to wait, I certainly am. All right. Cybersecurity. That's Caitlin's lead.
Yeah, so at the last town supervisor meeting earlier this month, the question came up that the county might be looking to move away from Laserfish. That apparently was shared at maybe a code officer meeting towards the end of the year. And that seems like, and I know that there was plenty of conversation prior to a shared services meeting on the fly car ambulance servicing. There was a consideration of doing something with the shared service with the software, things like that. And so I think we could go, and to me, this seems like, based on what the town supervisors were talking about, this seems like this might be a time sensitive issue if the county is really looking to divest themselves of something that I know at least the town of Ulysses uses quite a bit. Not necessarily as enthusiastic, right? But and not necessarily because we'd be opposed to an alternative, but the loss of that as one of our important sources for preserving our records, that would be a significant impact. And so I wanted to bring it to this forum. I don't think we should get rid of cyber and IT, but as part of my report feedback, looking for feedback, is that something that really is a committee level concern? Or is that more of a TCOG concern that we might benefit from having somebody from the county come in and talk to us all directly about?
Yeah, Joe, can I speak to that?
Yeah.
So I think there's been, I don't know how to frame it, but the county at this point is not ready to let go of Laserfish, but we still want them to come in. So I think I've made a request that for the March meeting, I can't remember his name. Lauren, is it Lauren?
Yeah, Lauren.
If Lauren would be available to come in and talk about the county's plan to support Laserfish, or maybe work with us to explore other options, because I know some of the towns. Anyway, so I think it can happen with Lauren. So I don't think there's an immediate concern, as I thought there might have been when we had the town supervisors call. But I still think it's something, and the suggestion was to ask Lauren to come to the March meeting.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
Dan, can you shed any more light about, the impetus for the Laserfish concern? Is it because of cost or because of inadequacy in terms of its functionality?
This subject is new to me, actually. I've never heard this one before.
Okay. Linda.
I wanted to, I went to some of the meetings on the code enforcement, and I was appalled that we might be getting rid of Laserfish. We use it extensively, and we have been able to succeed in getting all of our code enforcement functions streamlined online using Laserfish, without any of this really expensive software that other people are anticipating. And Brent also offered to give it and show it to anybody else who was interested in it. one of the good aspects is that by using it, it automatically gets fed into the county system. So I really hope we don't get rid of it. I think it's a very valuable system. And I can't remember the woman's name because I don't use it myself, but there's someone in the county who's extremely good at it and is very helpful with any of the municipalities that ask her help for, with it. So it's been invaluable. And it's cheap, which has to be helpful to a lot of people.
I just want to underscore, I don't think there's any immediate issue now of it going away, but I think it's a longer discussion that Lauren is hopefully coming to the March meeting to have.
I think that person that Linda referred to, that's probably Alana Congdon. So.
You know, this does bear on the, you know, how it is used on the larger question of the collaborative use of you know, electronic resources, I guess I would say. We can, it's expensive, as Linda points out, to do, for us to, yeah, for all to do our own thing. And this is it's just one component of a larger picture of what's the most, not just the cheapest way, but what's a cost-effective way to accomplish the, you know, what we're using all of this technology for. And it's certainly there's a trend towards you know, towards cloud storage of just about everything. Software support from you know, someplace other than, you know, what we do internally, and using more and more of those resources instead of, as we gradually move away from, you know, pencil and paper and file cabinets full of records that are sometimes hard to access. And you know, the county was it played a very helpful early role in giving us some place to put our records. This was the, you know, the Laserfish system was for many of us our first introduction to electronic storage of records at all. And for some it remains the primary the way that our records are electronic records, at least, are kept. But you know, you know, data management and storage is a big part of a lot of what we do in the course of providing services to our residents. And I just wonder whether or not that there's an opportunity for collaboration and cooperation in sourcing not just the technology, but the you know, the analysis of the situation and what's the best, most reasonable way to do it. Because there's you know, there are those who argue that, you know, local is better, it's less subject to disruption. I don't feel like I know anywhere near as much as I'd like to about this whole subject, and I'm one of many people who are, you know, having to make, you know, part of groups that are trying to make decisions about this stuff. So to me, that it's an argument for this remaining an important committee. And about more than just Laserfish. Ronnie?
Well, I was just going to say, perhaps if there is a dedicated effort by the county to move away from Laserfish, that they come in and talk to TCOG about it and get feedback from all of the municipalities who are currently using Laserfish. And how do they propose to make it still cost effective and efficient for everyone? So I don't know how far along they are in that process, but it would be interesting to know. And
then a couple, like, yeah, my sense is that based on what Rod said too, is that in a couple of months they'll be far enough along that they could talk to us.
Right.
Is that your sense, Rod?
Yeah, I don't think there's any, I think they backed away from whatever Lauren might have said at a public meeting. So
Good.
I think he wants to have a discussion just as Ronnie suggested. So I don't think he'll come with, I think the idea is that we'll have a discussion with him to say, let's hear about Laserfish, let's look at other options. So I think it would be a kickoff to an ongoing discussion with the right people.
Okay. That being the case, and it sounds like there's almost consensus on that approach. What then is the role of the committee? Or do we ask it to back off too? Mark?
So I just want to chime in to say I agree that from my own perspective, I want to learn. I think it's been underutilized here in Caroline. We did use Laserfish a little bit, but I'm pretty sure talking to the clerk that we could use it more fully. So I'm interested in learning as much and what Cayuga Heights has done with the code office. We've moved ahead with something, and but that's can always be changed. So so I don't know. I guess I was gonna, as far as a committee, I mean, for this topic, I'm sort of anxious to hear what Lauren tells us at an upcoming meeting. So.
When I say committee, I'm referring to the Cybersecurity Municipal IT Services Committee. These are referred to as subcommittees in the minutes, but they're not subcommittees; they're committees because this group is not a committee. Caitlin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that cyber and IT. Oh, sorry, it's such a. Sorry, someone's calling me right now. Sorry. I think it could cover such a broad range of things that having a sense from TCOG more broadly of what priorities might be, as opposed to just, 2 or 3 municipalities getting together and saying what our priorities are, would be really helpful. So I think if we could build into a conversation in March, just a general sense of where TCOG is in terms of issues that feel like a priority, because my priority could be very different than the city of Ithaca's priority to the town of Groton's priority. So getting a better sense of what you would like to achieve collectively would be, I think, incredibly helpful of where we should dedicate some energy.
So could that be rolled into a discussion with Lauren about not just Laserfish, but the broader question of IT services and their support function for a diversity of needs? Is that what I'm hearing you suggest?
I mean, I don't know if Lauren's the right person, so I can't speak to whether or not he's the right person to articulate that. But I mean, I see some, and I think it's a reflection of the previous conversations that happened during shared services in prior years, which is we all have these, overlapping needs potentially, but we're not quite sure what those needs are in comparison to our neighbors. And so I think it might be valuable for after we hear from Lauren, for TCOG to have a conversation about where we might see some commonalities of interest, because then the committee can actually go pursue those and bring back information that's functional for the rest of the group, as opposed to just arbitrarily picking something. That would be my recommendation. I personally would like to see the county be able to take a more like in the way that they provide Laserfish. I would love to have a conversation with the county more broadly about how we could collaborate more effectively to get some if it's software or IT or cybersecurity issues umbrellaed in a centralized location. But that's where I see it being most effective. But I'd like to hear from the other municipalities of where they have identified needs.
And that should follow in the same meeting, you think? The interaction with Lauren about or in conjunction with, I guess it's where the conversation ends up going as both a result of the conversation, which is going to be broader than just Laserfish anyway. That we should illuminate where the committee might go from there. you would hope that you would get some direction out of it, and not just have it be a discussion with the county without a implications for what we do with it.
That would be my goal. At least it's a starting point.
Yeah. Sounds good to me. Good on that one. Emergency planning and preparedness. That's Mark mostly, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'm chairing that committee, and I definitely want to keep it going. I don't have a report for today. Lisa pretty much updated us on that. So, but I think our group wants to stay engaged with this and facilitate however we can.
Who's involved in, or others who might be interested in getting involved?
So, Rorden, Dan Lamb, Mike Steitley, Joe Milliman. We're pretty much the core group. Sometimes Justin Van joins us.
A dynamic group. So you feel like you've got plenty to chew on, and it's a very worthwhile thing to keep going.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Energy. Rod's been spearheading that effort.
Yeah, and I don't have any report, but there is the start of pulling together a similar gathering that happened, I believe, last November with the reps of climate smart communities and clean energy communities to share information. I actually think there's been some changes to those programs, so to provide updates to those programs. So we can use that whenever that happens. I'm assuming it will happen before the March TCOG meeting. I don't really keep track of membership. We just put together something and share the information, and people show up who are interested in that topic, and that seems to be working. But we can use that next meeting to see if they're beyond this sort of general sharing of information, if there's a topic to zero in on. So stay tuned.
Okay. Sounds good. Transportation is practically Robert's domain.
Yes, good afternoon. I sent everybody and was distributed the monthly report for the Transportation Committee, which has been for a number of years a committee of one, namely me. And I would welcome other people to join me on the Transportation Committee, or even to take it over if they chose to do so. This, I've been keeping close tabs and attending the meetings of the TCAT, not necessarily the board of directors, but sometimes the ridership committee, because unfortunately the board of directors meets at the same time we do. So on the same day. The main thing that I have to report this month was that Scott Vanderpool, the general manager of TCAT since 2017, has announced his retirement. They are looking for his successor. He will be leaving the transit agency on March 1st. And right now, his last report, which I received earlier this month, indicated that things are still about the way they've been for the past year. We're still about 50% under what peak ridership was in 2019. They have a continuing problem recruiting bus drivers. They're still about 20 drivers short of what they'd like, and they're working on it. But that's it's pretty much in a holding pattern right now. But I'd welcome other people to either join the committee or to take on the committee and to focus on perhaps new things like getting a downtown bus station somewhere. And that seems to be a priority that nobody seems to be working on at the moment.
Yeah, I kind of wonder about trails too, but there are some of us in this group who are actively engaged in trying to negotiate the easement for the South Hill Trail extension, which would be a major when we pull it off, a major addition to the transportation infrastructure for the county, especially for those who walk and bike.
So that's a new way that it could evolve, perhaps.
Mhm.
discussing bikeways and walkways and that sort of thing.
Dan, or maybe Mike was first. Yeah, Mike.
Okay. I guess my question is, I understand the getting bus drivers, but do they have an explanation why the attendance hasn't, or ridership hasn't gone up as much as they expected to? Is it because they cut some of the routes off that were popular, or I'm sure they kept the most popular, but some of the other routes, or there is no incentive for people to do it? Because, they had a fairly good ridership before the COVID. And
my understanding is it's more a supply problem than a demand problem. Now, of course, it was a demand problem during COVID. I don't think there is a diminished interest in ridership, but the problem is it's a chain reaction. They have fewer bus drivers, so they've had to cut back the routes. Cutting back the routes, people have to find other means of transportation. And I think that's the core problem. And they're working on it, and it's a situation where we don't have enough people, men and women, to drive buses right now. And that is the problem they're confronting. They also have, to a lesser extent, some problems, and it's less a problem now than it was back a few months ago with maintenance. But they say they're getting their hands on maintenance, but the problem is they don't have the personnel.
Dan?
Yeah, two things I'd like to say. One about the trails is that recently, I think it was maybe just a month ago, the county legislature did accept the trails plan that our planning department put together. So I'm not sure there's a lot new in there, but it's all updated and put in one place. So that's available on the county website if anyone wants to look at that. And then as far as TCAT, I was on the TCAT board for 7 years. It's been a year now since I've been off. And what I'm told is that the current TCAT board is really taking an active role, is really working very hard to try to turn things around from what they can do for TCAT. And I don't mind saying this in this group. You may know that I was very critical of Cornell's role in TCAT for a long time. But everything I hear is that Cornell has really stepped up to the plate, and that things are they are really contributing a lot in terms of resources and the right attitude. And that, that's the bright spot in the TCAT story from my point of view, is that the board is really doing a good job at this time and really dedicated.
One thing I observed, go ahead.
I had another, and maybe your observation is more pertinent to what Dan just said, but my question was whether or not there has been any sense of whether or not the phenomenon of remote work, which has impacted the transit systems elsewhere, is a factor here. I think, anecdotally, at least I understand there's a lot more empty office space downtown than there was pre-pandemic. It hasn't all come back. People like working remotely, and the market's changed. How much of that is affecting the ridership, do you think, or do you know?
I think it's a big deal. First of all, I think you'd be hard pressed to find an industry that was hit harder from COVID and longer than public transportation. I am told it just hasn't really rebounded in most places. So I'm told that we're not that out of line in terms of other areas. And yes, remote work is a big factor in it.
One thing I did notice from the internals of the ridership report is that the campus routes were fairly well patronized. And there was ridership was pretty stable, if not increasing, with the campus routes. It was the rural routes that seemed to suffer, but they blamed it on the fact that they were cutting some routes, and some of them were rural routes. But the idea of remote work plays into that. And it hasn't been discussed in board meetings, but it would seem logical that the people who had previously commuted from Danby into Ithaca to work at Cornell maybe now are doing more work at home, perhaps. And as a result, there isn't the rural demand that there was, but that hasn't come up in discussions.
Well, that's why I asked. Because it certainly bears on the ability to, increase the ridership if the demand is simply decreased, and it's not a matter of availability, but a shrinkage really in the potential base, and that has implications in terms of viability of some of those routes altogether. Somebody had a question. Or not. So are there others who'd like to sort of join in on this committee besides Mr. Lynch? You're doing such a great job, Bob, that we're content to have you be the committee.
That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. I would welcome somebody perhaps from the city who might provide the city input in terms of having a transit hub here. That would be an important addition, and maybe we can talk about that in the future.
Great idea.
Yeah. Okay. Who's doing water quality? We lost Susan Brock.
Cynthia.
Cynthia, rather. Yeah. And without her, we didn't. She was the committee of one too, was she not? Pretty much.
She was.
Yeah. Is this a topic sufficiently of interest that someone thinks the committee is warranted?
I guess I'll just say that the Quio group is really active now, and I
Yes.
think maybe that works.
It is already an intermunicipal organization.
Mhm. Could ask for, periodic reports from them if we wanted.
Or if something surfaced, an area of concern that one of us identified and thought maybe it would be better addressed or here than in the other ways. I mean, you've got Quio, and what's the other group? There's another one too, and I get them confused.
I think Quio is relevant because they really are about, watershed concerns across municipalities. So it's
And it's broader than just Tompkins, right? It's watershed wide, so it's multi-county.
Yep, that's right.
Is there any TCOG member that is not a member of Quio?
I don't think so. I think we know, or we're all, at least in part, in the Cougar Lake watershed.
But Joel, I like the idea of having somebody from Quio come and just give an update sometime to TCOG. I think you were thinking of the Cougar Lake Watershed Network is the other group.
Yes, that's what it is. Yeah.
But I think they have representation on Quio. Maybe? I'm not sure.
Yeah. There's what, you share my confusion as to how those two groups relate to each other.
I can add one bit of input regarding water quality, and that is the alternate Enfield delegate to TCOG is Supervisor Redmond, who is very, very active in water quality issues. And she might be willing to participate in any water quality committee or even give a presentation at a future meeting. I don't want to volunteer her services, but I'm just throwing out her name because she's very, very knowledgeable of that particular area.
Good point, Bob. She has been very vocal, and that is indeed a focus of hers. The one area that has come up in the past, and I'm not sure how much Quio was focused on it. Well, it probably ought to be some focus on it because a major source of sedimentation in the lake is the how our ditches and highways are managed, particularly in the dirt roads. Some of us have some of, and I because I really don't know. I do look at some of the CWIO reports and so forth, but I don't remember seeing a whole lot about this. And that's an area ripe for collaboration, mostly amongst the highway folks. And given the nature of the way our municipalities are structured, with highway superintendents being separately elected by and large, we have a limited ability to direct, but we could facilitate cooperation, perhaps, if it's a concern, of course, which it certainly is in the hilly topography in the southern part of the county, maybe more of a concern than in the more northern regions where it's not as erosion prone. We just sort of see how it goes there, but
Joel, my internet dropped off. I didn't hear what this topic is.
we're still talking about water quality.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just raising the whether or not there's a shared concern about the sedimentation resulting from the way our highway departments do manage the ditching and maintenance on particularly unpaved roads. Because management practices do matter. But the absence of commentary doesn't mean everybody's terribly alarmed. At least that's how I read the tea leaves, unless I'm wrong. So those are the committees we have. Does anybody see a need for other committees? An area of interest that's being essentially ignored or under addressed? Our interest is already comprehensive and well covered by these committees. Okay, if that's the sense of the group. Items for next time. We already mentioned the interaction with the county over the IT and Laserfish specifically. And Rob, you had something, right?
I had an idea because it's come up in a meeting of the county legislature of the Government Operations Committee, and it actually came up in the most recent legislature meeting, that there might be a desirability to have a discussion about assessment cycles, because there is some effort at some level to go back to a multi-year, maybe a triennial assessment system. And there have been 2 points of view on that. And there was some suggestion at a prior meeting that maybe TCOG should weigh in the future on that. So I'll raise that.
Isn't that already, Dan, you could probably speak to this. Isn't that already out being dealt with at the legislative level?
Yeah, so Bob's right, certainly right. There's been a lot of discussion lately, and for a little while there was some momentum behind the idea of going to a triennial assessment. I believe that has died. I believe we're going to do everything we can to stick with annual assessments. If anybody would like to, you're welcome to weigh in any way you'd like, but it is going to be discussed again at the next Government Operations Committee meeting, which is a week from today at 10 a.m. So and there's going to be, Jay Franklin will be there talking about this issue. So if you want to hear directly from him, that would be a great time to get some direct information.
My sense from reading what was being talked about, the information he was providing to the committee was that the argument for going to triennial was it would make it easier for them to cope, and that they would have a hard time maintaining annual assessment without additional resources being devoted to their department. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is fair. And just to say the other impetus for this, or the reason that their office is so overwhelmed, is because of our crazy real estate market. Everything is just going up so fast, so much that
You have to redo everything
tremendous
every
amount of
year.
work on their part. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the issue here for the legislature is to stick with an annual, you might need to devote some more resources to the assessment department.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really complicated topic, and I do not understand all of it, but almost everyone seems to agree that an annual assessment is the fairest way to go, and we're going to do everything we can to maintain that system. I'm not speaking for every single individual, but I think that's the majority of the legislature.
Mm-hmm. That's my feeling as well. I wonder, are there others here who feel strongly that that's wrongheaded and that we'd be better off with a triennial? The argument for it is that you've got at least a breather in terms of the rising assessments, but on the other hand, it's not this. Well, if you freeze the assessments in a particular municipality, all you're doing is freezing the tax base. And the argument for there is that that also tempers the ability of a municipality to raise the levy, because an inflating tax base allows you to keep the rate the same even though the levy is increasing. And Jay shared information and showed that the levy tends to parallel the increase in the tax base, because you can, and you can say, well, the rate hasn't changed. Mark.
So this tweaks something that I wanted to kind of add to this conversation, that I agree that if updating everyone annually to do it fairly is a good thing to do. And I just, I don't agree with the characterization as you put it, Joel, about how, because I've had a couple discussions, and the assessment is completely, and I've told people in arguments that, me, the town board and the supervisor, we're the ones that establish your taxes. And so I think that's really important to keep clear, so that, and it's a very difficult conversation because taxes are calculated by multiplying, the tax rate, which is a function of the total assessed value times your property value. But at any rate, I just would like to, I don't want to get into it here. I'll get all tangled up, but I'd just like to think about ways to clarify this in order to clarify it with the public and support the work of assessment to do this fairly, so that this, I think this is a common misunderstanding that people have.
And assessment department, and assessment department ends up taking the brunt of that
absolutely
approach, or misunderstanding, really. I was just trying to articulate there is another side to this. It's not one that I come down still in the end, as many of us probably do, on the side of annual assessment because it's just the fairest way to allocate that, which is not necessarily a fair way to tax in the first place, but that's a whole different conversation.
That's right.
Yeah. Dan.
Yeah.
You know, this conversation's interesting, and it's making me think. I wonder if a good function of TCOG in this subject would be an educational session. Get Jay in, invite everyone from your town that wants to come, and kind of do an assessment 101. I think that might really actually be very valuable.
That might be a good way to start.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be helpful.
Right. So that coming back around to what Bob was suggesting, right? Caitlin.
Sorry, this isn't related to assessment, but it is county connected. And I just wondered if anybody else received outreach from the Board of Elections about your districts changing or how many polling sites you have changing. That I received that recently, and I didn't know if it was an isolated thing, or I know they're changing equipment. So I'm assuming that's driving part of it.
I didn't hear a thing.
Okay, thank you so much. It sounds like it might be a Ulysses thing. Okay, thank you.
It targeted you for some reason.
And we run the most interesting recent elections. So, I don't know why we were getting fewer spaces, but that's okay. Thank you.
Linda?
Going back to assessment and tax rates, I think you are overestimating the mathematical ability of the majority of residents. Most people who look at their tax bill and compare it to last year says last year I owed 1,000 and this year I owe 1,500, and they, in my opinion, blame the village, the taxing authority, not assessment. They might sort of know that their assessment went up, but in reality, it's the village of Cuyahoga Heights that is raising their taxes somehow, some way, even if we keep the rate the same. And I think that's what most people zero in on, rightly or wrongly. Because the other thing is we've been able to keep our tax rate flat, but we've been able to increase, the amount of taxes that we collect because the assessments have gone up. So, you sort of have
it's the levy that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly Jay's point. It's the levy that matters, not the rate. So when you increase the total amount that you're raising by taxes, people have to pay more. And if you can be raising their taxes and lowering their rate at the same time, and it happens. When the tax base inflates faster than the rate of increase of the budget. So it sounds like a assessment 101 might be a good idea. All right. Anything else for next time, or we'll see how it goes. Right? There's always it's like our local agenda. They get filled out even when we don't necessarily know a month ahead what's going to be on it. It somehow when it comes back around, it's got plenty on it.
So I would suggest we invite Jay Franklin to our next meeting. Would that be a wise thing, a good way to start?
That's what I thought you were suggesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Just want to kind of solidify it.
Yeah, right. Linda?
I might be regretting this, but Brent and I have been talking not so much about assessments, but about the fact that the assessment office looks at dwellings differently than at least the village of Cuyahoga Heights does. So that we've had a number of situations where we think that the resident is a single family residence, but they've gone ahead with or without a permit and put in more structure so that when they go to sell it, they are saying it's a two-family dwelling. And Jay goes along with that. as a two-family dwelling. But in reality, given our laws, if you can have a two-family dwelling, you have to have fire separations. There are lots of different little things that you have to do. And Brent has been battling with Jay about this over the last couple of years. And the thing is, if they want to define it differently than we do, that's one thing, but they don't tell us that they've changed the assessment, the definition of the dwelling. So if they'd at least do that when they decide to change it, it would be very helpful. And that's a whole different subject matter than the assessment value itself. But it's something that Brent has actually asked me to bring up at some point, and I figured I really couldn't not do it this time. So I don't know if anybody else has had these issues where.
Yeah, sure. Because what Jay's doing, in effect, is saying, well, here's the reality of it. It's being rented like it's a 2-apartment house. We all have probably some, things that have been created illegally, sort of under the wire, gone under the radar, and one way of looking at it is, well, this is the way it is. It didn't come to be that way properly. But why should that affect the assessed value? Because assessed value is based on, what it actually is used for. Would the assessed value go down if they were taken to task for creating that second apartment illegally?
I think if you have a 2-family dwelling is probably assessed higher than a 1-family dwelling. A lot of the situation happens when they want to sell it.
Yeah.
So
right.
So they do this so that they can say, we have a house with an accessory apartment or a place. And in reality, at least from a legal point of view, that they don't.
Yeah.
And the problem is that it makes it very difficult for the village to be able to figure these things out. Whereas if Jay's office actually sent something to our office and said, we're changing this from a 1-family dwelling to a 2-family dwelling, then we would be alerted to that, go out there and see whether or not it truly is. And if it isn't, and that's what they want, well, then they have to go, I think they'd have to go to the planning board for one thing, and then they'd also have to do things to make it safe.
Yeah.
None of all of that is bypassed because we don't realize that somehow or another that's happened.
So the change in status is the issue, really. That
Yes.
They're reclassifying it without any kind of coordination with the local municipality.
Exactly. I don't know. Does anybody else have these problems? Maybe
Well,
Brent
we may have it and not realize it.
Right.
Yeah. Brent keeps pretty good track of this kind of stuff. So
yeah, right. Well, that could come up in our conversation with Jay next time.
I'll see how brave I am.
I think it's a legitimate complaint. That there really ought to be some coordination here, and that's part of what we're about. So it's certainly appropriate venue.
Right. I don't think Jay doesn't see it as a problem. I think he just thinks it should sort of go away. So
yeah, right. Well, not so easy.
Right.
But you're saying it is a building code issue, right?
Exactly. It's a building.
Yeah.
Code. Yes.
Yeah, and a compliance issue as well. Without the, that's why it's a building code issue. But it's also a zoning issue in some cases. In our case,
could be.
Yeah.
In our case, it probably wouldn't be, but yes, in some places it would definitely be.
All right. Well, with that, I think we're through the agenda and can adjourn. Nice to have a light agenda. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Joel. See you, everybody.
Yeah.